Welcome to Around and Around, the OCD Circle. My name is Elizabeth, and I have been living with obsessive compulsive disorder for over 60 years. I am not a therapist or a member of the medical community. I am just an ordinary person like yourself who will be sharing my thoughts and experiences with you, with the hope that you will feel less alone. If you don't have OCD, I hope you will learn some information that will help you understand this disorder better. Some of the topics I will be covering may be triggering for you as a listener. If so, I apologize in advance. Since I don't know what your triggers are, please refer to the episode summary in the show notes before listening to each episode. If at any time you feel like hurting yourself or ending your life, please call the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988 if you are in the United States. It is open 24 hours a day, and you will be connected with the nearest crisis center to receive immediate counseling and local mental health referrals. Now, on to today's episode. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Around and Around the OCD Circle podcast. I hope you're having a great morning so far. In today's episode, I speak with Janaya, who is a naturopath and a mother living in Sydney, Australia. She has lived with obsessive compulsive disorder since the age of 17. She was diagnosed with OCD 2 years ago. Janaya does not have contamination OCD, and she does not have counting rituals. One of her biggest triggers is anything that brings her joy or things that should be celebrated. Janaya describes how she has lived with OCD in the past and the steps she took to overcome it after 20 years. She also talks a little bit about her profession as a naturopath and how she helps others who have mental illnesses or simply want to live a healthier lifestyle. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Janaya and that it helps you feel less alone in your struggles. Good morning, Janaya.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. And
Great.
you?
I'm great. I do have some dogs barking right now. I apologize. They have yard men out there. So I was just wondering if you want to just give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself so people can kind of get to know where you live and, a little bit about you.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So I'm Janaya. I live in Sydney, Australia. I am a naturopath. I'm a mum. And I do some admin. And
What does
I
that
have
mean?
OCD.
What does admin mean?
Admin, it's like just work. Oh, I don't know how you'd explain it. Work on the computer.
Oh,
Do
okay.
people's admin. Yeah.
Okay.
For other people. Yeah.
In the States, we call them admins for short, but we also call people who are in like Facebook groups, YouTube channels, they're admins.
Of
So I
course.
just wanted to see, so we call them administrative assistants here.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, okay, awesome. Okay, so what made you decide today that you wanted to come on this podcast and tell your story?
I think I've lived with OCD as far as I can remember, I think around since I was 17, 18 years old. But I only was diagnosed 2 years ago. And that was because I didn't know that I had OCD. And since I have found out what I have been able to take the right steps and get help. And at the moment, I know OCD is one of those things that can come back, but at the moment, I like to think that myself recovered in the way that I know how to handle my symptoms, and my life is amazing now compared to how it was. And if there's one person I can help out there work out that they have OCD and they don't know that they have OCD, that's all I can ask for, because it's life-changing.
That's awesome. So how long do you think you lived with OCD without knowing what you had?
At least 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it definitely got worse over time.
Hmm.
So I think it kind of started as more of an annoying thing, but as I got older, I guess as things became more important to me, my symptoms got worse, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Was starting to affect your daily life more?
100%.
Hmm.
Yeah. But I think I just thought it was me. I thought I was a bit broken. I didn't realize that it was, I had been diagnosed a few times as having anxiety. And so I would see people for that. But sometimes what I was being asked to do with treatment for anxiety actually made my OCD worse. So I'd stop doing it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I've never been to Australia. My grandmother went 3 times. If it wasn't for the plane ride, I'm petrified of airplanes. I would have
Right.
gone already. But I was curious how mental illness and specifically obsessive compulsive disorder is viewed over in Australia. Is it something that's talked about? Is it diagnosed pretty well? I mean, I guess in the last 20 or 30 years here, it's been brought up more by people. But when I was younger, when I was like in my 30s, they didn't know what it was. And so that
Yeah.
was in 92. I could tell them I have an obsession, but no one ever suggested that I had OCD. It was always anxiety.
Yeah. Well, it's again, that's hard for me to answer because, like I said, I went to a few people to be assessed, and I went for help because I couldn't live the way I was living. But they would always say to me, "Yes, so you've got anxiety," and I would work with these people for a little while, but it never really felt right. And it was actually my husband who he was listening to a podcast 2 years ago. Um, and it was a woman sharing her experience with OCD. And he came home and he said, "Look, I really want you to listen to this." Because he'd said in the past, "Oh, I reckon you have OCD." But, I didn't know what OCD was. To me, I was like, my house is a pigsty. There's no way I have OCD, because that's kind of all I knew about OCD. But anyway, when I heard this woman talk about her experiences, I could really relate. And that's when I was like, oh my God, like I might be able to get some help here. So, literally within 2 weeks, I was Googling and I found myself an OCD specialist, a therapist who specialized in OCD. I contacted her, I was diagnosed, and we were starting treatment.
So that's what we're trying to do here is get stories out so others don't feel as alone.
Yeah.
And so that's incredible that even 2 years ago, they were not even suggesting that you had it.
No, and I think
That's
once I found the right person to
right.
talk to,
Hmm.
they could help me, but
Hmm.
I had to find that myself, I think. And I think it's because my OCD, like now that I've come across a lot of people with OCD, I follow a lot of advocates on Instagram and so much and so forth, and I really see myself in them. But before, if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't know. I feel like, you know what I mean?
Hmm. That's right.
Because I do have a messy house. I don't have obsessions with germs. Like, I don't need to count to certain numbers. It's all these things that you hear about a lot to
Hmm.
do with OCD. But for me, it was more like, my obsessions are anything to do with causing harm to people, not wanting to cause harm, not wanting to be responsible for causing harm, anything to do with my family breaking up, whether that be because I did something and I would be taken away from them, or I burnt my house down, or I, accidentally left the house unlocked and someone broke in and took everything that was precious to us. Anything around that is what really got me anxious, and that's where my obsessions were. So I would always be checking the locks, checking I hadn't left things on, but not just checking once. It would sometimes take me 20, 30 minutes to leave the house. And then, I mean, that's where it all started back way back when. But now, and then as I got older, it got to like checking I hadn't put something in an email that I'd sent that might upset someone and cause someone to have emotional harm. Like it's the way me talking about it now, it's crazy. Like I cannot, it doesn't make rational sense. If I dropped water in a shopping center, I would have to go and find a cleaner and I would have to go get them to clean it up, because if anyone fell and it was my fault, slipped over, I couldn't live with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those types of things. And I would Google, I would research, I'd ask questions. My big one was seeking reassurance. I would seek reassurance from anyone who would give it to me. I would sneakily try and seek reassurance. And that was a big one for my husband. He was just like, I don't understand the way your brain works. I don't know why you'd be scared about that.
Yeah, we're dealing with that here too.
Yeah, it's horrible. Like I really think about, like when I think back to how I was living at the end, like I say at the end, but just before I worked out I had OCD, I was looking into checking myself into a facility because I couldn't live like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It was so bad. It was like living in a nightmare where just everything you did, everything you said was going to turn into like the worst case scenario.
Do you think that maybe it got worse because you had children and
I do.
you need to protect them?
Well, I never really had OCD around my children as such, as in I was, I'm quite a carefree mother. Like I let them do a lot. But it was more around losing that family unit or doing something to jeopardize that family unit, that got my OCD worse. So, yes, in a sense, the more I had to lose, the worse my OCD got, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
But I was never really, I mean, I guess when my first daughter was born, I was probably a bit obsessive with checking she was breathing and things. But I think that's pretty normal for a first-time mum.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, I was thinking more like, you're talking about the house possibly burning down, someone breaking in, protecting your children. I know mine went full blown when my daughter was 2,
yeah,
and they said it was because of that, because of her age, and that's
having
when
no
it just,
control.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think as my kids have got a bit, especially that 2-year-old range where they don't really understand they don't understand consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be quite stressful. Like, hold my hand, cross the road, and they don't want to do it. And maybe I think more, worst case scenario, car's going to come and run you over. You know what I mean? It's just
Mm-hmm.
really, it can be quite stressful.
Yeah. Okay, we've talked about a lot of these already. Do you have any specific triggers?
Triggers for me are definitely things that bring me joy. So, for example, my OCD and my needing to compulse was always the worst on a Friday afternoon before the weekend, because I was excited to spend time with my family, and get together. Just before a holiday would always increase my anxiety, that anticipation of excitement. And it's almost like the way I see OCD, I don't know if this is a bad way of looking at it or anything, but for me, I always found I call it a man, I don't know why, is a real bully that just wanted to steal any joy that I had. So whenever I felt good or happy, I'd always get this pang of, but what about this? Or what if you did this? Or what happens if this happens? So for me, things I look forward to is a massive trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Or things that should be celebrated, or my successes. They're the types of things that trigger me. But I have learned how to deal with that now, from therapy, with medication, through, a lot of stuff that I do. So now I do look forward to those things. But I do always feel extra thoughts just before something exciting happening. I just know how to handle them.
Yeah, and that's real interesting because I used to say I had a happiness level or a happiness scale. I remember using that term and that I was getting too happy and it scared me to be too
Yeah.
happy. That was years ago, but that brought that back. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was almost like I can remember, you know, I can count on my fingers. It just didn't happen very often, but I'd be walking along or I'd be in the bath or something and I'd go, oh, I don't have any worries. Oh, bang. There was always something on my mind, but if there wasn't, I felt good for like 1 second, 2 seconds, and then pow, something could come along.
So you find like you have to have something to think about all the time or it comes in. Is
I
that right?
did, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you still do that? Do you keep your mind pretty occupied?
I have less so in the last few months, but I did find even though I felt like I was feeling a lot better, I still, I always had my earphones in and I was listening to a show on Netflix or listening to a podcast, just something to keep my mind kind of focused on something else, especially if I was doing something like cleaning the house or the washing or the folding, something where you just really don't need to think.
Mhm.
But now I do enjoy a lot more time in the quiet on my own. And I'm actually finding I'm becoming quite creative. So it's exciting because before I'd never had that opportunity.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really good.
So how did what kind of treatment did you have that has given you so much relief? Like,
Look, I do a lot. So I started as soon as I found out I was seeing the psychotherapist who specialized in OCD, and I think she definitely did exposure and prevention therapy. Is that how you say it? EPR, EP,
mhm.
yeah.
ERP?
Um, ERP. Sorry, I always get
That's
them
okay.
mixed up. So we did that, and we started with the least scary things and worked our way up. But I got to a point with that I couldn't take that step because I was too scared, if that makes sense. It felt too irresponsible to not perform compulsions. And that's when I then saw a psychiatrist and I was put on medication. It took a few months, I'd say like 2 to 2.5 months to make any difference. But then I definitely noticed I was able to take that chance. It kind of took the edge off that really scary risk. And then I was able to sit with the discomfort a little bit more. And I think as well, she used a bit of acceptance and commitment therapy. So there was a lot of tools around that helped. I followed a lot of advocates on Instagram, which I have to say was so useful for me because they would just, I had this whole community of women. There was mostly women actually, but there was some men, I should say. And they would just put out a tip or make me feel not alone in the way that I was thinking. And I would just kind of scroll through there every day and get a bit of encouragement, motivation. Yeah, that was really useful. I'm also a naturopath, so I've done a lot of work on calming my nervous system, really supporting my adrenals, helping me with that resilience to stress, because when I'm stressed, it is worse. The thoughts come so much harder when I'm tired. The thoughts come so much harder. So I've done a lot of work around that. And the biggest thing I think, not the biggest, they've all worked together, but self-love. I've learnt to love myself again. I think I really, OCD makes you doubt everything in your mind and you have no trust in yourself, and it can make you really not like who you are. So I think I've done a lot of work on trying to build up my self-confidence and taking risks again And yeah, just giving myself that compassion, because now that I don't suffer with OCD, I realize how horrific it is. Like it's so hard to explain to people who don't have it. Yeah, it's a horrific condition.
You mentioned some Instagram advocates. Do you have
Yeah,
any that you can think of that you could tell our listeners so that they could go over to Instagram and follow
yeah,
those? And I can, if you send them to me, I can put them in the show notes. Absolutely.
yeah. I'll do that. I'll do that
Okay,
because
so
there's
for
so
those of
many,
you who are
and
listening, I'm going to put these in the show notes, some Instagram advocates for you to go check out that will maybe help you feel better and, give you some peace in your day and also help you feel less alone. I am not competing with anyone. I'm just one of many who's trying to bring awareness. So I'm real big on knowing this question. I'm getting ready to do an interview. It's going to come out probably after yours with a husband and wife team. And one has OCD and the other one does not. And we're going to talk about how the spouse sees it from his end, you know. And so you don't talk just about your spouse, but I'm just curious how your family reacted when they found out you were diagnosed. Did it help things or did it make things more clear to them? And then do they do anything to assist you? Which you've already talked a little bit about your husband. He was the reason that you found out you had it, you know?
yeah, he's great.
So,
Sure. So when I found out I had OCD, I think obviously my husband was so happy because um, we could deal with it, if that makes sense. Because up until that point, it was always like, I don't know what to do here. Like, we don't know what to do. Um, I think it made a lot of sense for my parents because, they had to deal with a lot of my reassurance seeking. But again, they didn't really understand what OCD was. So I think I kind of had to educate them a little bit, and I would definitely be sending them podcasts and, sharing these advocates with them, just like the things that really resonated with me that I thought that they would get, just to kind of show them what OCD is, because I had to learn myself. I think at first my mum and dad were a bit like, oh, I don't know if you should be sharing this information with people, because it kind of is, it's scary, right? Like,
right.
do you share all this information? And I was a bit scared at first, but I've kind of like dedicated my Instagram page now to sharing great stuff about OCD that other people share. So at the moment, I've just been sharing, this is what OCD is, and here's some tips on how to deal with it. Just because if there's anyone in my network, I just want to put it out there. And like I said, if I can help one person realize they might have OCD and they can get help sooner, that's all I can, that's awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And then with my friends, and I've definitely been more open about it. And everyone asked me to explain it because, again, they all have the same idea about OCD that I used to have. So
Mm-hmm.
I think once people know, they're accepting, but they also had no idea, right? Like, again, I think because I lived with it for such a long time, I just thought it was me. So I kind of kept these things a secret
You kind of hit it,
because
yeah.
I hid it. Yeah, because I knew it wasn't normal. But
Sometimes they
yeah,
explain so much, though, to others.
it does.
Oh,
It
that's
does.
why she does that. Okay.
That's why she would always check in with me after we'd been out in case I offended her, like just
Mm-hmm.
little things like that, because I just read so much more into things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Also, you said that you are employed. I was wondering if OCD has interfered in your workplace or your employment. Or
Yeah, again,
and also relationships? Have you lost any friends because of it?
I don't think I've lost any friends because of OCD. Maybe I thought the worst of them and I stopped talking to them because of the way my thoughts would be. I often see worst case scenarios, so I could be quite distrusting of people.
So you cut them
Um,
off instead of them cutting you
yeah,
off. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
and maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, but maybe it was. I'm not sure. Um, in terms of work, I mean, before I had children, I had a corporate job. I really enjoyed my work, but definitely looking back, I don't think it interfered. It probably made me a better employee because I was very conscientious. I didn't want to make mistakes. I took things very personal. Um, so maybe that was a good thing for
Mhm.
that perspective. But I know, I only recently, 2 years ago, finished my naturopathy degree. And by the time I finished it, I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to use it because there's so much responsibility being a naturopath and dealing with people's health. I didn't think I could do it because I had so much anxiety around it. But I'm really pleased to say I am now setting up my own naturopath business, and I feel like I can really help people, especially people with OCD, because I can relate. And I'm really excited for it because 2 years ago, I didn't think I could do it. It was too scary.
Mhm. Is this something that you do online?
It is. So I
Okay.
would see clients what do you call it? Video telehealth,
Mhm.
by telehealth. And yeah,
So can they be in the United States or not?
unfortunately, they can't. I can only work with people in Australia because of insurance
I'm being
purposes.
told that this podcast, the second largest audience right now is in Australia.
All right.
So there's a possibility that you may have people asking to talk to you. So, you might get some clients from this interview. You never
Oh, well, that'd be
you
great.
know.
That'd be
So
great.
I will ask you for your contact information at the end, and then I'll also put that in the show notes because
Yeah,
that's
sure.
that's what my podcasting host is telling me, that Australia is the second highest
Oh,
listener
wow.
group. So that's exciting.
Okay. Yeah, that is exciting. And I'd love to help anyone with mental health issues,
So
but
what does that include that you're
OCD.
doing for them?
Yeah,
Those
sure. Um, so as a naturopath, I have herbal medicine. I have flower essences that I can use. A lot of it is to do with diet and just lifestyle modifications, ways to calm the nervous system in the moment, but also over time. So when you do get hit with that stress and that anxiety, you're able to just be a little bit stronger. I definitely, like I said, I take medication. I use advocates. Have done the therapy, and I use all my holistic healing. And so for me, it's not one or the other. I feel like you need a bit of everything.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, and that's what it does. Naturopathy can help calm the nervous system. It can help uh, build your resilience to stress, and it can, yeah, there's lots of things. Help regulate your hormones. I know for me, my OCD symptoms were definitely worse 10 days or so before my period,
Mhm.
to the point where it was like when I finally got my period, it was such relief. Like, oh my
Mhm.
God. And I did used to have to increase my medication around that time.
Mhm.
It was like, and I could tell, like in my head, I was like, oh, anxiety, check my app. Oh, yep, 10 days till my period. But then, yeah, I now no longer have to increase my medication at that time of the month. I've done a lot of work on supporting my hormones and regulating them a bit better.
So I was going to ask you, have you ever had panic attacks in the past?
Great question. I don't know. Um, when I was pregnant, I both times towards the end of my pregnancy, I had increased heart rate, but I wasn't overly anxious. I did see a heart specialist, and they think it was actually something to do with my heart, but who knows? I don't
Mhm.
know. It
Okay.
happened both times I was pregnant, a few times, to the point I had to go to hospital and they had to do these things to slow my heart rate down.
I was just thinking this type of treatment that you're doing could be very helpful in escalating your anxiety to the point of a panic attack. Because if you can get your anxiety down to like a 1, 2, or 3, it might not go as far, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
And panic attacks are very scary. I have them, and I need to be more in tune with my body, because if I would listen to my body and my head and everything, it really wouldn't get that far.
Mm.
But I don't do anything about it, and then it's just full blown.
I
So
think that's the thing, right? It's really hard in the moment
mhm,
to slow yourself down
mhm.
because you are anxious and you feel. I know for myself, I used to feel like I have to impulsively do something. I can't just sit here and take a breath. I don't have time for that. So that's why I think, yeah, like all the work doing around it over time, and then eventually, just like using the skills from just from therapy, right? Like I remember some of the skills I practiced, like one was putting the thoughts on a train and letting it just go past and letting it come back, but not getting anxious about it. And I remember the first few times I did that, I was like, oh my God, this is so frustrating. But then eventually I was able to do that. And now I don't even have to think about it, it kind of just does it itself.
That's a great visualization.
It was a great one. I really
Mhm,
liked that one.
mhm. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about specifically that we haven't already discussed?
No, I don't think so. I
Mhm.
can't, yeah, not that I can think of. Your questions were great.
Great. I'm glad. So, what I always tell my guests at the end is if they want to leave some words of wisdom with the listeners, it could be something that you've learned, it can be an antidote, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I'm definitely going to share those advocates with you because I found them really helpful. And I guess, like, I mean, everyone's different. And I have noticed, like, there's a lots of different types of OCD. But one thing that I see come up quite a bit is the whole thoughts about, you know, in that moment, if you, it takes time to get there, obviously, but, I now always say to myself, like when I get that intrusive thought, just, for me, as soon as I open that rabbit hole, if I go down there and start digging, I just get so anxious. So now I just say to myself, like, okay, so say I get a thought into my head and it says, what happens if this happens? It's like, okay, there's a small chance that that might happen, but I'm going to trust in myself that if that happens, I'll be able to deal with it in the moment. I'm not going to waste any more time in my life preparing for it. If it happens, it happens, and I'll deal with it then. I have trust in myself that I can. And then I just move on. Does that make
Yeah, you
sense?
have to try to let go of the control. And that's
Yeah, big
hard.
time.
Letting go of control is so hard.
It is so hard. And that's like what I said earlier about it just took, it was too scary for me to take that step at one point. I needed more time, I needed extra help because it can feel so scary.
Mhm.
But yeah, I
Would
guess
you
it,
would you tell
yeah.
listeners about, the ERP therapy? I hear a lot of people on the message board saying it's really scary. I don't want to do this because I can tell this is going to be hard. You're glad you did it?
I am so glad I did it. I'm so glad I did it because I honestly could not live like I was living anymore. It just got so bad. and it was really interrupting my family life. It was interrupting I didn't want to do anything. I just didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to do anything because it was all too scary.
Mhm.
And that's no way to live.
Have you been treated for depression as well, or any other mental illnesses?
I haven't been treated for it, but yeah, they have said when I was being assessed at one point, I can't remember, they definitely thought I had depression as well.
Mhm. And I think sometimes our OCD can be the cause of depression
Of course,
because
of
we just
course.
get so down on ourselves because, like, why can't I make this stop?
Yeah,
Why
and I
can't I
was
make
really angry at myself because I felt like I have everything I could ever want and I'm still not happy. But it was, and like I said before, the more I had, the worse it got because I was more scared of losing what I had. So it was like you say, like round and round circle, right? It's just
Mhm.
vicious circle of like there's no way out. It
Absolutely.
was almost like if I had nothing, I would have nothing to worry about, right? But then I'd
Right.
want more. So yeah, tough.
Yeah, I would go as far as try to push things away, push people away, push opportunities away,
Definitely push
because it's like
opportunities away.
I don't know if it was that I didn't deserve them, but it was like I didn't deserve to be happy. I couldn't handle that much happiness because
Exactly.
something was going to go wrong. I was always
Yep.
waiting for D-Day.
Me
And
too.
things are too good right now. I can't handle this. Things are too good right now. Something's getting ready to explode, you know.
Yeah.
So then I would cause a problem. Uh,
Yep.
you know.
That's it. It is. Like for me, I often felt like I was self sabotaging
Mhm.
because it was like everything's good. I can even remember, like, just when you said that, like laying on the bed with my daughter, tickling her, we're having a good time. And then it's like, this could all be taken away from you. You're not allowed to have this much fun. Like that's
Mhm.
how I see OCD. It's just like this bully that wants to take everything good. Oh,
And you're not letting it win or him win.
I'm not letting it win.
That's
No, not
awesome.
anymore. Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else you want to add?
I really love what you're doing. I think it's great. I've listened to all your podcasts now.
Oh, really? Okay. Well,
Yes.
they get better.
Okay.
I'm getting used to it now. And the beginning, it was really rough. And I've got probably 6 more interviews lined up. So
Oh, great.
I feel like if I can give a platform for people to come on and share their story, that's just even more important than it is for me to be sitting there at the microphone.
Oh, it's
I'm
great.
excited that people are being so brave, and that's you included. It is courageous to come on and tell about something so personal and so
It
painful, but I'm
is.
glad that you have come out of it, you know, strong, and you're always welcome to come back on if there's anything you ever want to talk about, any topic. And it was great meeting you today.
Yeah, great meeting you too. Thanks, Beth.
All right, thank you. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Janaya. She mentioned OCD advocates on Instagram, and I have listed some of them in the show notes below, along with her website where you may contact her. Don't forget, if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode, just message me at one of my social media contacts, which are also listed below. And remember, I now have a Facebook group around and around the OCD Circle. I welcome you to join that Facebook group where we all talk about our disorder and support one another. Until next time, keep smiling. It's going to be okay. I'm in your corner. You are not alone.